Good morning, students. This lesson is of class 10th for the subject of History and Civics. This lesson is being submitted to you on 26th April 2021. All the students, now please open page number 34 of your textbook and listen very carefully. The history of the national movement can be divided into three phases. The first phase lasted from 1885 to 1905. The second phase lasted from 1905 to 1919, and the third phase lasted from 1919 to 1947. The early nationalist. The early national leaders who dominated the Congress policies during the first phase of the national movement were called moderates or early nationalists. So, this period is known as the moderate phase. The leadership was in the hands of educated middle class professionals like lawyers, teachers, and officials who got inspiration from Western ideas and thoughts. It was made up of people like Dadabhai Naoroji, Justice M.G. Ranade, Sir Firozshah Mehta, R.C. Dutt, and Gopal Krishna Gokhale. Beliefs of the early nationalists. Number 1. They had faith in the honesty, integrity, justice, and fair decisions of the British. Second, they believed that the British would help India in governing as per the Western standards. Number 3, they hoped that the British would slowly grant home rule to the Indians and trusted British government organizations and their promises. Number 4, they believed that the social and economic backwardness was the chief reason to the growth and development of India and not the Britishers. Number 5. They looked towards Britishers for inspiration and guidance. Number 6. They believed that only by putting their problems and demands Britishers would do justice. Demands of the early nationalists. The main demands of the early nationalists were constitutional reforms. The early nationalists wanted more say in the government. They wanted to get freedom slowly. They made the following demands. Number 1. Indian Council should be abolished. Second, to expand legislative council and legislative assemblies at the center and in the provinces. Number 3, they wanted control over financial matters. They said no taxation without representation, which means Indians would pay taxes only when they have say in the government. Number 4, to appoint Indians in local bodies, chambers of commerce, universities, etc. Number 5, they wanted British to establish self-government in India as in Canada and Australia. Number 6, they demanded direct elections and a larger share for the Indians in the Legislative Council. Number 7, executive and judiciary should be separated. Before we go any further, children, it's question time. Please write the answers in your notebook. Question 1. Name any two prominent early nationalist leaders. Question 2. State two constitutional reforms demanded by the early nationalists. Question 3. What was the basic belief of the moderates regarding the British government? Children, you can pause the audio for 3 minutes to write the answers. Children, I hope you have finished writing the answers. Let's continue. Economic reforms. They demanded reduction of heavy land revenue and protection of the peasants against the demands of the jamindars. Second, to reduce expenditure on the army and the money saved should be used on welfare activities. Number 3, agricultural banks should be established to give loans to the farmers. Number 4, to make inquiry into India's growing poverty and famines. Number 5, Britishers should develop banks, irrigation, health and medical facilities for the Indians. Number 6, to develop industries and transportation and communication system in India. Administrative demands. First, Indians should be given high jobs. Second, to hold Indian civil service examinations in England and India. Third, executive and judicial functions should be separated. Number 4, the powers of the local bodies should be increased. Number 5, the Arms Act and License Act should be changed. Number 6, Indians should be given more jobs in administrative services. Number 7, primary education should be made compulsory. 8, the police system should be improved. Defense of civil rights. First, the early nationalists were against the suppression of freedom of speech and expression. Second, they demanded the right to assemble and form associations. Number 3, they wanted freedom of the press. Number 4, they demanded right to circulate leaflets and pamphlets and wanted changes in the Vernacular Press Act. Methods of the early nationalists. The early nationalists believed in constitutional methods. In this, they included discussions, processions, speeches, peaceful propaganda through press, sending representatives to the British government to put India's problems and demands and passing resolutions. The methods used by the early nationalists were: Number 1, they conducted meetings and collected demands. Second, they used press to criticize government policies. Number 3, the early nationalists sent petitions and memorandums to the British. Number 4, petitions, prayers, and protest, the 3 P's, were fully used by the nationalists. Fifth, they sent Indian representatives to Britain to put India's problems and demands. Children, let us study about the achievements of the early nationalists. Number 1, they created the feeling of one nation among people. Number 2, they educated the Indians and created political consciousness among them. Number 3, the early nationalists gave training to the people in political and administrative work. Number 4, they showed the true nature of Britishers. Number 5, due to their efforts, the Britishers introduced certain reforms like: Number 1, appointment of a Public Service Commission. Second, holding of ICS examination both in London and in India. Number 3, appointment of the Welby Commission on Indian expenditure. Criticism of the early nationalists. Number 1, the methods used by the early nationalists were not enough to get freedom. Second, they depended on the generosity of the British instead of depending on their own strength. Number 3, they failed to understand that Britishers were using India to make wealth. Number 4, they failed to get the support of the common men. Official attitude towards the Congress. In the beginning, the government adopted a favorable attitude towards the Congress and considered its leaders as friends, but as the demands of the Congress started increasing, the British attitude changed. The British followed the policy of divide and rule to make the Congress weak. Prominent early nationalist leaders: Dadabhai Naoroji. Children, before we do Dadabhai Naoroji, I will give you 3 questions which you are required to answer in your notebook. Question 1. Mention any 2 achievements of the early nationalist. Question 2. State any 2 shortcomings of the early nationalist. Question 3. What was the attitude of the early nationalist towards freedom of the press? Children, you may pause the audio for 3 minutes and write the answers. Students, finished writing the answers? Let us continue. Dadabhai Naoroji was born in a Parsi family at Bombay. He was known as the Grand Old Man of India. Dadabhai was elected in the Bombay Municipal Corporation. He published the newspaper Rast Goftar. His contributions: Number 1. India's unofficial ambassador. He was famous as India's unofficial ambassador to England. Dadabhai established the London India Society, which put India's problems before Britishers. He was the first Indian to become the member of the British House of Commons in England. Number 2. Role in the Congress. Dadabhai was one of the founder member of the Congress. 3 times he became the president of the Congress. He supported constitutional methods. He supported self-government, boycott, Swadeshi and national education. Number 3. Exposed the economic problems of India. Dadabhai's economic ideas were written in the book called Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. He supported the drain theory. He said that the British had drained or taken India's wealth to Britain in the form of raw materials, salary, taxes, revenue, etc. The British did nothing to improve agriculture and industry. Gopal Krishna Gokhale. Gopal Krishna Gokhale was born at Kolhapur in Maharashtra. Gokhale was highly influenced by M.G. Ranade and he became member of his Deccan Education Society. Let us see his contributions. Number 1. He forced Britishers for reforms. He was against huge expenditure on the army, racial differences in the appointments to high posts, and imposing tax on cotton. Gokhale wanted judiciary and executive to be separated. He helped to pass the Minto-Morley reforms. Second, Servants of India Society. Gokhale established the Servants of India Society in 1905 at Pune. Its main aim was to spread education, especially among women, to provide health facilities and to put an end to the social evils. It also wanted to improve the condition of depressed classes. Number 3. Role as a member of Imperial Legislative Council. Number 1. He asked Britishers to reduce the salt duty. Second, he wanted excise duty on cotton goods to be abolished. Number 3. Due to his efforts, the Britishers reduced the toll tax. Number 4. Gokhale supported primary education for all. Number 5. He wanted land revenue to be reduced. Gokhale and Gandhiji. Gokhale went to South Africa and helped Gandhiji to fight against racial discrimination. Gokhale forced Gandhiji to return to India and join politics. Gandhiji considered Gokhale as his political mentor or teacher. Surendranath Banerjee. Surendranath was born in Bengal. He was the first Indian to pass the Indian Civil Service examination. Let us see his contributions. Number 1. Established the Indian Association. He established the Indian Association to educate the people and to create public opinion. Second, created an all India political organization. He established the Indian National Conference, which merged with the Indian National Congress, as both had same objectives. Political ideas. He published Bengali newspaper. He was against the Arms Act, License Act and Vernacular Press Act. He was against the Morley-Minto reforms of 1909. With this explanation, I end this interactive session. Please do the given questions in your notebook. Question 1. The period from 1885 to 1905 is called the period of the early nationalist. In this context, explain the following. First, why is this period called the period of the early nationalist? Question 2. Demands of the early nationalist. Question 3. Methods of the early nationalist. Thank you, students.